Lately, I just don't feel like myself. How many times have you said that? Or how many times have you thought that to yourself or heard it from somebody that you love? Today, I want to spend some time unpacking that sentence and offering a little bit of a reframe that I think changes maybe everything about how you relate to what you're going through in every given moment. So let me just offer this. What if not feeling like myself is this passage into this next version of yourself? I want to introduce you to Erik Erikson. I know, what a name. This is him, if you don't already know him. He was a developmental psychologist, and in 1968, he published this book called Identity, Youth, and Crisis. His central argument, the one that he actually built his entire career around, was that identity is something that forms and then reforms through a series of what he calls psychosocial crises. Not necessarily catastrophes, but mini crises, turning points, if you will. Moments where the existing self concept becomes almost insufficient and it has to be reorganized in that moment. And he actually mapped out 8 of these stages across the entire human lifespan, not just in adolescence, but in young adulthood, all the way through late adult life. He's basically saying that identity reconstruction is a fundamental feature of being human. We are meant to reconstruct ourselves over and over and over again. And the version of us that was stable and what felt like us isn't meant to be permanent throughout our entire lives, you know? The stability that we feel, the sense of knowing who we are, of feeling at home with yourself, or of having this clear sense of who you are is real. It's not an illusion, but it's a configuration. It's a particular organization of your experiences, your roles, your relationships, your sense of what matters, and it's all held together for a period of time. And then things change. They become insufficient, inadequate, and they have to be dissolved and rebuilt. We have new experiences and then we change. That is vital to our development. And what I want to talk about today, because I think it's actually very important, we have taken this very normal developmental process that Erikson himself described, which is the seemingly periodic leaving of the old self and becoming someone new. We've treated it as a symptom of something being terribly wrong, changing too much, questioning your beliefs, grieving who you used to be. It's all of this is now coded in therapeutic and self-help culture as evidence of something going wrong. And I want to be really careful here because obviously I'm not dismissing mental health. Like, depression is real, anxiety is very real. There are clinical states that require clinical support, and I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about a very large portion of the population where people are experiencing something completely different. They are experiencing grief of an identity that no longer fits, and they don't feel like themselves anymore. They're experiencing disorientation of being in between selves. They're experiencing this thing that's completely normal. It's completely developmental. It's completely a part of our human experience to leave an old self concept behind when it becomes insufficient, when we get more experience and then a new one forming. We're not broken. We're not sick. Something is changing. Things are happening. The tragedy is that people are having this ambiguity and feeling like something is wrong with them when nothing is actually wrong. It's literally structurally necessary. It is a necessary cost of becoming who you're meant to be in every given moment. Ancient cultures literally expected this. They built from it. This connects directly to what we talked about in the last lecture about liminality and the anthropology of Arnold van Gennep and Victor Turner and the ritual containers and the community that holds the initiate while they are between selves. And what I want to add here from Erikson's angle is these ancient cultures weren't just intuitively kind to each other. They were developmentally accurate. They understood that the self periodically needs to dissolve. They built systems, they gave that dissolution meaning and structure. They said, hey, there's nothing wrong with us, and there are people that have been through it before and they came in on the other side, and we're going to hold you while you do this because this is just a part of being human. There are elders that have walked this path. You will then walk this path, and we have a structure for it. And in modern culture, we don't have an equivalent for that. And I think that that's sad. And what we have instead is a culture that equates identity instability with some psychological issue that's going on, some catastrophe that needs to be managed or resolved as quickly as possible, rather than what Erikson is saying, which is just merely a turning point that feels uncomfortable. It is an invitation into the next iteration of ourselves. So people that are sitting in between selves, which is obviously uncomfortable and it's genuinely disorienting and it's genuinely grief-filled, they're leaving them without a map, without a container, without anybody that can tell them, hey, this is what it's supposed to feel like. You're not off. You're literally just between selves. And of course, I always think it's very important to bring in a second voice because she complicates Erikson in a way that's important and kind of zones it in on women specifically. Her name is Carol Gilligan. She writes in a different voice, published in 1982, and she took a direct aim at Erikson's developmental model. Her argument was that Erikson's stages were built on the study of men, and then it generalized it to everyone. The model of identity development produced and emphasized autonomy and individuation and the consolidation of a separate self. And what Gilligan found was that women's identity developed work completely differently. Women form identity relationally through connection, through care, through ongoing dynamic experiences of self in relation to others. The self is not supposed to be isolated. For women, it's something that is formed and sustained within connection. What this means for us is for the woman who is between selves, what she's navigating is a relational one. So her sense of who she is has been somewhat organized by her roles that she plays, somewhat organized by her relationships. And then when those shift, the reconstruction requires not only the internal work, but also relational work. It requires new connections or the deepening of the existing ones, but they must change. That can hold and then reflect back this emerging self. And that's why a container matters so much, because it is, for women specifically, it is meant to be built in relationship. It's meant to be witnessed. There's meant to be a person who sits with you in between and says, hey, I see you. I see who you're becoming. I'm witnessing you. I'm here. I'm not doing it for you. I'm witnessing you. And Gilligan wasn't saying, hey, he's completely wrong. No, she was saying it's incomplete. It's incomplete. It's only looking at men and women evolve in a different way. And for the women I work with, that completion is essential. So I want to bring it home here. As always, I'm getting very passionate. If you've been feeling like you don't know who you are right now, like the self that used to feel really coherent with your life and the people around you has become a bit uncertain, and maybe you're in a period of grief about the version of yourself that no longer fits the life that you're living, or if you're questioning, you know what, who am I now? If the question, who am I now, is feeling like an urgent, daily, sometimes frightening reality, you're not alone. There's nothing wrong. You're literally just between selves. This is a part of being human. You are in what Erikson would call a crisis, but I would love to call a turning point. This is a hinge. We're crossing a threshold. This is a developmental moment where the old self dissolves and the new one gets assembled. It's uncomfortable by design. And the discomfort does not mean, I just want to nail this in, it does not mean something is wrong. It is a sign that something is in process, that something is happening. This is so normal. And the question is like, not how do I make this discomfort stop? It's literally, how do I move through this the most graciously, with support, with a container, and with the understanding that this has a meaning. I wrote a full essay on this over on Substack, the Erikson stuff, the etymology, and the Carol Gilligan stuff, and that's linked in the description. And if this named something in you that you've been sitting with, I'm accepting one-on-one clients. The link is there too. So tell me in the comments, have you ever used the words, I just don't feel like myself? And then what did you think that it meant at the time? That's my question for you. I'll see you in the next one.